All right, welcome back to another week of Online Lift. Today I have my helper here, Cora and Hopi, and they're going to help us do a new experiment. All right, so Cora, what we're going to do is we're going to put in, so we have some warm water here, and we're going to fill this up to about 40 milliliters, right there. Okay, now you're going to put in this whole bottle of glucose. Okay, can you do that? Yep. Squeeze the whole thing in there. Good job. All right, that's good. All right, now we're going to put 5 drops of methanol blue. All right, so you got that in there. That's it. All right, so methylene blue and glucose. And now we need our sodium hydroxide, and we're going to put, we actually need the scooper for this one. We're going to put 3 scoops of sodium hydroxide.
The big one?
The big one, yeah. So you squirt it in there. Good. Let me do it. All right, you're good. Okay. That's 1, 2, 1 more, 3.
Oops.
Oh, that's okay. Okay, so we've got our blue solution here. Looks good. I like it. All right, so we're going to put it right there for now. All right, so we put our solution into this larger bottle, and we made it. We put some more in there so we can see the reaction. All right, so now we're just going to leave this and let it sit, and while we're waiting for that to react, we're going to talk about the lesson. So, Cora, first, last week we talked about Palm Sunday. Can you tell us what Palm Sunday is?
It's when Jesus rode a donkey to Jerusalem. And they put it down
palm branches.
branches.
And were they sad that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem?
They were super happy, but some were like mad.
There were some people that were mad, but most of the people were happy. And so they were celebrating because they thought Jesus was going to be their king, right? Mm-hmm. All right, so he enters Jerusalem, and that's the start of what's called Holy Week, which is the week leading up to Jesus being crucified and then raising from the dead. And so all the things that happened are starting to lead up to those events. And so Jesus is doing all these things, and this is the last part of his ministry on earth. And so a few days before he's crucified, he tells his disciples to get a meal ready to celebrate the Passover. And the Passover was a special occasion for the Jewish people to celebrate back when Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt. And so they were celebrating this event where Jesus saved the Israelites. And so they all get together, and they're in the room, and they're having dinner. And Jesus takes some bread, and he breaks it, and he says, I want you to eat this bread, and when you do this, I want you to remember me and remember that I gave up my life for you. And remember, he hadn't died yet, but he knows he's going to die, and he wants the disciples to have something that reminds them of his sacrifice. And then he takes wine, and he says, I want you to drink this wine, and every time you drink this wine, I want you to remember the blood that I spilled to save everyone from their sins. And so he does these things he tells the disciples to do this to remind them of what Jesus did for them. And that was the start of why we do communion. Do you know what communion is? Mm-hmm. And so at church we take communion, and we eat a cracker, and we eat some juice or drink some juice, and we're doing that to remember Jesus dying for us. And why do you think that Jesus told the disciples that they needed to have something to remind them of that? Do you think that they're forgetful? Do you ever forget things?
Yeah.
Yeah, you forget things all the time, right? And so Jesus knew that we would forget what he did for us. So he did this example of how we can remember what he's done for us. Now, here's my question. Who remembers what color that bottle was?
Dark, dark blue.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
That's right. See, our memories, if you weren't paying attention, you would see that and be like, oh, it's always been that color. But really, it was dark blue when we first started. Isn't that crazy? Now, here's this reaction is actually very interesting because it also can remind us of way back in the beginning of Jesus' ministry, his very first miracle. Do you know what his first miracle was?
Turning water into wine.
That's right. He turned water into wine. And we can't turn water into wine, even with science, but...
We can turn colors into colors.
But we can do this. Cora, can you shake this up a little bit for us? Okay, shake it up a little harder. Harder. Here. Let's turn it upside down, like this. And there you go. Look at that. So we can't turn water into wine, but we can make this liquid change. And so what's happening in here is we put in a few things. We put in sodium hydroxide, and we put in methylene blue, and we put in glucose, which is just sugar. And so what's happening is the methylene blue has this blue tint to it, but it also is an oxidizer, which means that it wants to steal electrons. And so it's stealing the electrons from the glucose. And when it does that, it actually changes color. It turns into a clear color. And so when we leave this alone, the methylene blue is stealing the electrons from the glucose, and it's turning clear very, very slowly. And then what happens is we can shake the bottle, and when we shake the bottle, we're taking the oxygen that's in the air right here, and we're mixing it up with all of this liquid. And what happens is oxygen is also an oxidizer, and it steals electrons from methylene blue. And so when we shake it, it's taking those electrons out of the methylene blue, and then the methylene blue turns blue again. And so you have this reaction that can go over and over and over. And so if we leave this here and we leave it like this, in 2 or 3 minutes, it'll be clear again. And then if we shake it again, it'll turn blue. Isn't that amazing?
Can you have the glucose since it's just
Sugar? Yeah, you eat glucose every day. Do you remember the gummy bear rocket? Mm-hmm. The gummy bear rocket engine burns really brightly and really fast because of all the glucose. The glucose is burning, is turning into heat energy. And that's what your body uses. So when you eat and you have those simple carbohydrates, they're being turned into energy.
That's how we get energy?
That's how you get energy from food, because it has chemicals in it that get turned into other forms of energy that then make your muscles move. All right, well, that was it. Thanks, everyone, for joining us for another Lift Science, and thank you to my helper, Cora, for doing this with us, and we'll see you guys next week.